Hello, and welcome everybody to another episode of r/ProRevenge. My name is Ryan, the official host here on Reddit Voice, and I look forward to bringing you guys today's top stories. Before I do though, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button, as well as have notifications turned on, that way you could stay up to date with all the latest and the greatest. In my 35 years of being in sales and sales management, that was by far the most interesting performance review I have ever witnessed. Guys, I know this is long, but I assure you, this is a juicy one. His words, not mine. I was working with a B2B sales company. We sold service to companies, basically. And this company had managed to hire the most incompetent, lazy, and jealous sales manager I have ever come across. We were a team of 5 salespeople and a sales manager. All 5 of us salespersons hated our sales manager for various reasons, but we liked her personally. I was the top salesperson on the team. I was sitting at 170% of my yearly objective and was well on my way to President's Club. This is largely because I was the only salesperson on the team with real sales experience, and other sales managers were too incompetent to train a team. So, my VP came down for our yearly performance reviews and I was called in first. It was my VP and Mrs. B, short for bitch. I was expecting a positive performance review. Right off the bat, Mrs. B hits me with, "Sting, you know our location hasn't been performing at objective for a number of years, and we suspect this is because salespeople are misrepresenting their daily work." I'm taken aback. "Sting, I don't think you are actually doing what you say you are doing in your CRM. This is something that could get you fired." I looked at Mrs. B and I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah." I hit her back with, "I'm shocked you decided to go this route." Mrs. B, with a confident smile, said, "We gotta do what it takes to get this location on objective." I said, "Alright, let's play a game. Mrs. B, pick a day. Any day in the CRM, and let me prove to you that I went to all my appointments and did all my stops as recorded." "Well, Sting, I'm not saying you never go in the field. I just think some days you stay at home and put BS notes in the CRM. I said, "Mrs. B, pick a day. Any day. Pick a day you think I lied about my sales activities." So, Mrs. B picks a day. Now I'm smiling ear to ear, and I'm heated right now. I noticed the VP smiling at me, and his head slanted to one side. I suspected he knew Mrs. B was about to get absolutely effing owned, and he was right. So, she gives me the day, and I turn to the VP. "Mr. VP, are you aware of how Android phones work?" VP responds, "Enlighten me." I said, "By default, Android has location services turned on, and in fact, Google will track where you went and when. Naturally, I carry my phone everywhere, so let's compare what Google says I did that day to what my CRM says." So I pull up my Google location services for that day, and surprise, surprise, it's a match. Mrs. B is obviously very concerned at this point. I said, "I'm actually quite enjoying this performance review. Let's pick another day, Mrs. B." Mrs. B backfires. "We don't need to do that." I turn to the VP. "Mr. VP, would you mind picking a day?" He says, "Sure, what about XYZ?" He pulls up my CRM. I pull up my location services for that day. Guess what? It's a match. I then get ready to pull out the big guns. "Mr. VP, do you remember company XYZ with a contract value of in excess of 1 million that we lost recently?" "Yes, Sting, I remember. Apparently your competitor won them over on price. We can't win them all." "Mr. VP, here's an email from their VP stating that they've decided not to go with us for our failure to provide 3 samples for them to decide on which product worked best for them." "Sting, can you forward that to me?" "Sure, not a problem, Mr. VP." Forwarded it over. "Mr. VP, while I'm at this, let me forward you over several email chains before this where I clearly asked Mrs. B to order those samples. In fact, those very same email chain confirmed that she in fact had ordered the samples. He asked me to forward those emails to him, so I did. Now, Mr. VP, I had our service department look to see if any orders had been placed for those samples, and no orders were actually placed." He said, "I'm going to look into this." Mrs. B is sweating bullets at this point. My performance review has just turned into her performance review, and shit's not going right. "Mr. VP, I have one more thing I'd like to bring to your attention. Do you mind if I step outside for a minute so I can show you?" He said, "Sure, I need to have a talk with Mrs. B anyway." Now, I need to mention that several years prior to this, a general manager at another location had done something very awful I'm pretty sure we can't talk about on YouTube, and the company was sued and lost a lot of money because of this. Since the incident, the company was put in a very clear-cut policy of no sexual relations between management and people who work for them. It's immediate termination for the manager. Now, another sales consultant in the office was named Joe. Joe was a married man with 2 beautiful kids, and Mrs. B had the hots for him. She tried to have sex with him multiple times, twice on text. Joe and I had talked about if he should report this transgression. I walked into the sales office and said, "Joe, I think it's time we get a new sales manager. You got those texts?" He looks at me and goes, "Is today going to be the day?" I said, "Today is going to be the day." All the sales staff knew what was going on. The mood in the office was lifted. Joe and I began walking to the back conference room when the location manager, who was not a part of the performance review, saw Joe and I, and he asked, "What's going on?" And Joe said, "You're gonna need to hire a new sales manager soon." Location manager was confused. He said he's coming into the meeting, and we said fine. I knocked on the door. Mr. VP said come on in, so I did. There we stood. Joe, myself, and the location manager. Mrs. B knew exactly what was about to happen. We all took our seats, and I asked the VP, "Mr. VP, I just want to clarify a company policy. Sure. Is it true that if a manager tried to engage in sexual relations with a direct report, that it's immediate termination for that manager?" Mr. VP sits up straight, takes a moment, and goes, "Yes, if something like that came to my attention, my hands would be tied and I'd have to fire the manager." I said, "Well, Joe has something he wants to show you." Mrs. B got up and walked out of the conference room. She was about to cry, you could tell. Her world, her career had just completely wrecked, and I don't think she wanted to be around for the end. Joe went on to tell the VP how he's a happily married man with 2 beautiful kids, and Mrs. B kept hitting on him. In fact, she had sent him numerous sexual texts, and on 2 occasions openly invited him to come have sex with her, once in the office and once at his home, even after he had made it clear he wasn't going to have sex with her. Mr. VP asked to see the texts, and Joe provided them. The VP asked him to screenshot those and email them over. Joe said he would, and then the VP said, "I'm going to need both of you to go back to the sales office. The location manager and I have some talking to do." We walked back to the sales office, and I noticed the sales manager office had looked cleaned out. Apparently, Mrs. B was bawling. She was a wreck and crying, and she said she was going home. Joe laughed and said, "Yeah, she won't be coming back." It was about 20 to 25 minutes when the VP came into the sales office and asked me to come to the conference room again. So I did. I sat down, and the VP said, "Well, I'd like to inform you that Mrs. B has been terminated, effective immediately. With this being said, after your performance review and looking over your numbers, you are our top sales rep in the location and deserve nothing short of stellar remarks on your review, and you'll be getting that." I said, "Thank you. I do have one question." He said, "Sure, anything." "How do I apply for the new sales manager job that just opened up?" Mr. VP laughed and said, "You sure do like to strike when the iron is hot, don't you?" I said I do, and he said he'd like to let the new location manager know, and I'd be able to put in my application. I thanked him. He said, "No, thank you. In my 35 years of being in sales and sales management, that was by far the most interesting performance review I have ever witnessed." I didn't end up getting promoted. I ended up quitting shortly after this. Because they decided not to promote me, and instead hired a guy with no sales experience to be our sales manager. This rubbed me the wrong way, and also our service department sucked and couldn't deliver on what I was selling, and another company offered me more money. You threaten my job? I take yours. I'm a huge fan of this sub, and I'm excited to share my story and add to the boiling pot of sweet revenge. This happened last year. I was about 6 months into a food service job at the time. I worked in my university's cafeteria, prepping and serving food to the students. After closing, I took about 45 minutes to finish cleaning up my station and took another 10 to finish up with one of my coworkers' sections that she needed a bit of help with. My supervisor had left just after closing to God knows where, leaving the rest of us to our devices as he usually did. He was more of the watch and rule type. After I had finished, I took a quick 5-minute trip to the bathroom, as I usually did around this time every day. As I happily walked to the back to assist in helping the others finish so we could all leave, I hear a cough behind me, the sound of the calm before the storm. I ignore it, thinking nothing of it, and go on my way. I hear a more abrupt ahem, and I stop and turn on my heel to meet the shift supervisor's cold gaze, his hands crossed over his puffed chest in his regal stance. I gave him a questioning look as he looks on, expecting me to read his mind. "A half an hour?" he asks calmly, but with a sour tinge to his tone. Me, confused, I chuckle. Huh? This was apparently the worst thing I could have done. "You were in the bathroom for half an hour?" he yelled, stomping his royal foot. I was taken aback, as he had never come at me with a sideways tone before. I thought we were cool, but I should have known better seeing how he treated my coworkers. I was so shocked, I just stood there, staring at him like he grew 3 horns. I didn't feel the need to defend myself in the moment, as I knew the words he was spitting my way were pure BS. "Do you like your job?" he demanded from me. I did not, in fact, like my job. I had trouble holding back my smile at this thought as he yelled some more things I don't remember, as my ears had gone numb to his screeching at this point. I knew he had no power to fire me, and I hadn't even seen his mug for the past hour. I knew his words had no consequence. I had nothing to say to his tantrum, and as soon as he realized that, he dismissed me. I have trouble egging people on when they're being irrational, so I genuinely stay quiet and let them get out their baby fit. I quickly went back to my work and started scheming about how I could get back at this man. Over the next week, I compiled photo evidence of him slacking on the job, serving undercooked food, and statements from my coworkers about their individual experience where he ridiculed or threatened them. Then I took it straight to my boss that Friday. I laid out all of my evidence in my personal encounter, which they would be able to check the cameras and identify both of our whereabouts that day to see who was truly off duty for a half an hour. I didn't think much would come of it, as I was a relatively new worker, and honestly, I didn't care about anything that happened to that hellhole. I let it slip from my mind for the weekend. The next Monday, I come in before most and started setting up. After a while, the GM comes out of the back with the supervisor following her like a puppy, staring at his feet. He walks sheepishly up to me and invites me to sit with him at one of the tables in the cafeteria, where he admits to me that he was in the wrong, shouldn't have yelled at me like that, should be a better leader, is super duper sorry, all that yada yada. I sat there with the biggest grin on my face as he practically groveled at my feet, begging for forgiveness, as his boss watched on. This man sat so high on his horse for the past 6 months. I watched him on his celebration as he then apologized to each of my coworkers individually. Not but a week later, he was demoted to a backroom cook, and I had been given the role of shift supervisor. We never had a problem after that, and he was generally an okay guy. I hope he really did learn his lesson and didn't say all those things to just get it over with. Either way, this was the sweetest revenge of my life. I've since quit that job and work for a company with people who actually know how to respect others and individuals, whether their position is below or above their own. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this story as much as I enjoyed watching it happen. Gets a job just to make life hell for one woman. My auntie is a great woman. A little crazy, but great. About 15 years ago, my cousin got her first job in a warehouse. She loved it. My cousin Danny isn't like the rest of my family. We're gobshites, but she's really quiet and sensitive. She was fine in her job for 2 weeks, and then a woman who was at least 20 years older than her started bullying her. She started giving Danny a huge chunk of her workload and telling her to get it done because boss said so, and shit-talking her. Danny came home every day crying because it made her life hell, but she still stuck it out because we're fighters. My auntie hated this, but she did love getting her own back. The next week, Danny goes to work and has to meet the new workers in orientation. My auntie is stood at the front of them smiling and her hand is waving. She'd applied for a job at the same place to look after her until the woman left. Her plan started the next day. After having worked in warehouses before, she got the hang of it and was very efficient. She also made it a point to get her work finished quickly so she could take on others' work, mainly the bitches. After doing this for a week and talking to the managers in the smoking area about the work, and my auntie says that bitch has just been standing around with no work and that others have noticed too and aren't happy. The managers must have kept an eye on her as she was in a meeting a few days later. This pissed her off and she was venting to a lot of people. My auntie used this as an opportunity to go to the manager and say that bitch had been abusive and had been threatening about the warning to her. She was called in to another meeting and fired a week before her holiday month-long cruise, and one of the managers my auntie befriended and has a very close family friend since. She's known as Auntie Debbie in my family now. She still knows bitch and says that she was horrible to work with and had many warnings for a hostile work environment type of thing. She's now divorced, overweight, and bitter, and keeps asking Auntie Debbie to make her birthday cakes for family members for £5. TLDR, cousin gets bullied at her job so much that my mom gets a job there. Her mom then gets the bullying bitch fired a week before her month-long cruise. Sorry, it's so boring. There you have it, folks. The end of the epics. Did you like it? Be sure to leave a like on the video as well as subscribe, that way you could stay up to date with all the latest and the greatest. As always, my name's Ryan, the official host here on Reddit Voice, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.